So when I'm playing solo games of Battletech Alpha Strike, there's two different enemy AI systems that I like to use. The first one is Battletech Aces. Now, this is being developed by Limdander Studios for Catalyst Game Labs. You'll see them frequently playing this over on their Six Sides of Gaming YouTube channel. Typically, this is the Friday Night Aces games that they play, which I think maybe sometimes happen on Saturday, or maybe I just only see them on Saturday. If you threw down for the Battletech Mercenaries Kickstarter, you should have an early demo version of Aces. This is the early demo version that I used. Aces has come a long way since then, but since this is what's available to me, this is what I'm going to end up using, and this is what is available for now. I believe there's going to be an announcement about Aces coming up, I think, tomorrow at the PAX event, but we'll see what happens with that. The way the Aces work is that you have a deck of cards that's organized by role, and there will be a list of priorities for what that particular mech is going to do, and if it can't do that thing, or if one of the options doesn't align with what's going on the battlefield, you just move down to the next one. Pros of the Aces deck is that it's very detailed and gives you a lot of options as to what to do. Each card is very different, and so you're always sort of surprised by what's going to happen. Cons is that as you're working through those different steps and sometimes having to measure things out, sometimes having to disregard certain steps, it takes a little bit of time to get through what the card wants each mech to do. The other AI system that I like to use is Tabledrop Zone's Tabledrop Bot app. The way that this works is you'll just enter all the mechs that you have, decide whether they're going to be aggressive, sort of mid-range, or if they're going to hang back, and then tell the app to start calculating out what everybody's going to do. This one's nice because you can track heat and damage in it too, which is a fun little plus. Pros, this one is quick and easy. You just enter the information and it pops it out really quickly and lets you just move your mechs and get back to the game. Cons, because everything is so simple and a little vague, you sort of have to do a little more of the work yourself, and there's not a ton of variety in here, so there's not a lot that's typically going to surprise you. So for my next solo game, I got to thinking, you know what? I got these two AI systems. How about I don't play this one? How about I take the two AIs and smash them together? I mean, after all, we're used to AIs typically being some kind of robot. And Battletech is all about robots fighting each other. So now the AIs are going to fight each other. I wanted to be a little gonzo with the terrain here. So we're in like a magma world. I'm never much of a stickler for lore when I'm doing these games, but this is probably a planet that was devastated by the Ameris Civil War and was damaged beyond repair by some kind of seismic thing, nuclear weapons, you know. Taking a look at our two forces, here down at the bottom, we've got our Aces company. This is going to be using the Aces deck, and we've got a Pursuit, Battle Lance, and Fire Lance. That seemed to make the most sense for the way that the Aces deck works, and you sort of have some instructions on what to do with a Battle Lance in that. Up here at the top, we have Drop Zone company. They're going to have a Fire Lance, Fire Support Lance, and Heavy Striker Lance. So this is obviously not a scientific exploration of which AI is better or not. I don't really think either of them is better. They both sort of excel in different places and, you know, not really scientific because it's different mechs and different configurations. This was just sort of a fun grudge match between two different solo playing systems. So let's see who ends up winning. We're all going to win because mechs are going to get blasted. So at the start of turn one, it's just a lot of positioning here. I decided to do lance movement just to speed things up for myself, and that's kind of interesting using the AI systems here as well. You can see some of the initial maneuvering. There's going to be a bit of violence here. The Battle Lance, even with the Aces cards, sort of decided to spread out, whereas some of the others ended up clumping together. Because those mechs are so different, I got to use different priorities from the Aces deck, which was very cool. Right away, each side has lost a mech. I mean, having that Fire Lance stand still and just take sniper shots definitely meant that all that indirect fire was going to bring somebody down. So the Crab got blasted from downtown, and the Griffin got taken out by a withering indirect fire. Second round was a lot of pushing forward, jockeying for position. The Pursuit Lance here, you can see, jumped into one of those debris fields, which I was treating as forests, these like giant junk piles. No one in the lava yet, which I decided is difficult terrain and adds heat and does 1 damage. Turn 3 gets spicy. Aces Battle Lance and the Tabledrop Fire Lance each trade mechs as they're shooting each other from across that debris field. Sadly, the Pursuit Lance is just getting wrecked by the Heavy Striker Lance, which is moving in and just blasting him through that debris field. So while this turn was pretty uneventful, it was also really interesting just because orders ended up involving a lot of movement. The fire support lance was moving up to some cover. I mean, the direct fire lance for aces sort of planted itself for most of the game here. You know, the pursuit lance tried to get better positioning, and that heavy striker lance ran to get behind an enemy, which meant they all just plowed right through the magma, which I couldn't have been happier about. Again, the battle lance is sort of dancing around because with the different mech configurations, I had to choose different priorities. So they got spread out despite us doing lance-based movement. It was interesting to see how this iteration of the Aces deck got cagey in some cases and had have different lances kind of fall back to different positions, which ended up being kind of a good idea. They grouped up with friends and sometimes got to better cover. This next turn, finally, God bless you, Pursuit Lance. You have to kill the mech you had Blood Hunter on, and now Blood Hunter is going to bounce around for that Phoenix Hawk as it does its best to survive. Trading shots and trading positions over here on the east side of the map, and not a lot really to report. So I did my best to adjudicate some weird choices here with the Fire Support Lance putting their backs against a wall and the Fire Lance sort of lining up so that Volcano could provide them with good cover. Phoenix Hawk finally jumping into some back arcs, but the Heavy Striker Lance just really putting the hurt on them now that it's managed to move into a good position. Some more times where the terrain led to making instructions kind of weird just to make sure that cover was achieved, but it worked out because a lot of violence was happening here to the Battle Lance. Our last member of the Pursuit Lance still going strong as that Heavy Striker Lance starts to move in and get involved in like the rest of the battle by moving around the entirety of the battlefield for the most part here. Battle Lance and Fire Lance clumping up again here to grab whatever cover they could, and the Fire Support Lance just bouncing around. Hey, we sped things up with a cockpit kill to that Victor. Really sorry for the pilot of that Victor. This round also saw the Catapult finally getting dropped. This turn wasn't super eventful, but it had one of my favorite things that happened, where the Battle Lance has just spread itself out because of the way the Aces cards worked. You'll notice there's a guillotine over there behind the Fire Support Lance. They're not friends. That was the guillotine just having the right orders to jump behind an enemy and having enough movement in the jump jets to do it, and sort of getting separated from the rest of its lance to make a pincer maneuver back there. Meanwhile, sort of the rest of the teams are sort of pushing up, pushing out, keeping things fairly dynamic. Now it's getting a lot more violent. Our Flashman is down here at this point. That tricky maneuver by the guillotine was disruptive, but ultimately not decisive, and it gets taken down by that Fire Support Lance here eventually. Our direct fire lance for the Aces is getting in the corner. Team Tabledrop is still has a decent number of mechs on the table and is still hanging in there. But Blood Hunter keeps coming through. That Jaeger mech's pilot jumps into the yeet seat and is out of the fight. And hey, Young Blood, like a Phoenix Hawk, it is still surviving. Not a lot in this round, but I did note that for Aces, the Fire Lance does tend to do a lot of just planting its feet and shooting. So, I mean, that's kind of what you want from your snipers. If you have them in a good position, don't worry about your TMM. Let that be somebody else's problem. Okay, finally, the Grasshopper catches up with the Phoenix and puts it down. The tables are really starting to turn against Team Aces here, and they also lose their Marauder. At this point, Team Tabledrop had significant numbers, and I was getting tired despite having fun. So I decided to call the game here for Tabledrop Company. They are the winner. So what did I learn here? Again, both of the AI systems are very good. They both have their pros and cons. They're both relatively quick, with Aces being a little slower than I think Tabledrop. I found that both provided some big surprises that made things interesting, that mixed things up. What's nice about that is sometimes even if the system doesn't really know what's going on tactically because it can't, doing something that's kind of dynamic and surprising is just going to throw your opponent off, and they're going to have to respond to it, in a balanced game like this, and something that's not a set scenario. So I had a lot of fun. I hope this was fun to watch. The magma was probably a little too extreme, but since people didn't traipse through it too much, it wasn't too much of a problem. Really excited to hearing about what happens with Aces here. I think tomorrow, or if you're watching this after that has happened, you know what's going on with Aces, and ideally you're excited if you also never get an opportunity to play with your friends like I do and have to do everything solo, or just prefer doing everything solo. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll try to get another one of these out here sometime. I'm not going to say soon. Some.